Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you on for another Datalere webinar. Today's topic is how business leaders can evaluate the productivity of their data engineering teams. Just a little background here before we get going. Okay, got to get the right place on the slide. Just a little bit about Datalere. We're a consulting company that helps commercial and nonprofit organizations get the data they need, when and how they want it. You can see some of our clients there. The big news is that Eckerson Group has joined Datalere. I'm very happy about that turn of events. So we have strategy and implementation expertise under one roof. And I'm Wayne Eckerson, by the way, was president of Eckerson Group, now strategic consultant at Datalere, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Very fortunate today to have three distinguished panelists discussing this very important topic. Carlos Bossi, CEO and Chief Data Architect at Datalere, Josh Bartel, CTO at UDIG, and Reed Colson, EVP of Consulting Practices, also at UDIG. So I'm just going to give a little background, and then we'll just jump into the discussion. I will say, if you've ever heard a webcast on this topic, let me know. I don't think anyone's ever addressed this topic, but I get this question all the time from business leaders who are put in charge to some degree of managing their data team. So I think it's a very relevant, timely webinar topic, as well as a blog topic, which will actually summarize this event and this conversation and turn it into an article that you can refer to later. So it's often difficult to know whether your data engineering team is as productive and competent as it should be. When a data engineering team can't get ahead of its backlog and business users complain incessantly, it's tempting to question the team's effectiveness and capabilities. But if you don't have deep knowledge of data engineering practices, you won't know whether a 2-week turnaround on a data request is good or bad. And that's really unnerving for business leaders. So today, our distinguished panel will discuss how to tell whether your data engineering team is working productively or not. We will also examine how to rehabilitate unproductive teams and set KPIs to measure their output in an objective way. So with that, I'd like to unshare this screen, if I can do that, and have each of our panelists introduce themselves. So why don't we start with you, Carlos, and then we can work down the line.
Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot, Wayne. I'm Carlos Bossi, and as Wayne said, I'm the CEO, and I kind of function as the chief architect over at Datalere. And my background is I've now, as many years as I've been in this business, I like to say it's the only job I've ever done. I've been either a software engineer, data architect all my life, and been working for primarily in a data architect role for the last 20 years. So I bring a lot of experience. I've worked with a lot of different clients, both big and small, and I'm here to share what I see out there in the world in real life.
Josh, do you want to go next?
Sure. So like Wayne said, I'm Josh Bartel's Chief Technology Officer at UDIG. My background is very similar to Carlos's in the sense of both data engineering and software engineering. But I think practically more of what I do today is in the AI space as well, right? So as we try and innovate how we deliver and operate for clients, I'm also, that's both internal on our teams and also what we're doing for our clients. So that's me.
And last but not least, Reed.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. Happy to be here today. As the screen says, my name is Reed Colson. I describe myself as a 25-year data nerd. I kind of got here by accident, but stayed because every day felt like a treasure hunt. I've been sort of on what I describe all sides of data. I started more in the analytics space, building predictive models. I've done data governance, ran engineering teams. Spent 15 years at Cap One, was chief data officer at Markel, and I've been here at UDIG leading consulting for about 4 years now.
Excellent. Well, welcome all. We're glad to have you here to discuss this very important topic. So let me start out with the first question for Carlos, and then the others, Josh and Reed, you can jump on. So what is one surefire symptom that your data engineering team is not working effectively or productively?
Let's see. So this is one of those questions that there so many different things could be looked at. So I tried to think of what is the one thing. If I had one thing to look at, I would say that if your data engineering team is dealing with data object sprawl, and I'll kind of explain what I mean by that. If they're dealing with an excess amount of sprawl, they're probably not doing an effective job. And what I mean by that is that a data engineering team, a data engineering process should have a foundation and should have a well-defined foundation. We talk about landing zones and staging tables and refining data and analytic data and then modeling it in certain ways. And that should be a good foundation to build on when you're building a new functionality from a data engineering point of view. If a data engineer has to always create a new table or always create a new process to build something, always create a new procedure, we should be in the mode of like I like to say, like software engineers, we should be in the mode of reusing code, reusing objects, of building foundations that execute other parts of our foundation. And so we're not always having to create something new. A strong foundation gives us that. So if I don't have that strong foundation, you see data engineers, they end up with a schema with 10,000 tables and they create a new one every time they do something and don't really know what's in that schema altogether. So I would say when I say data object sprawl and the problems they deal with, it would be something like that. So if you see too many objects and tables for what they're doing, that would be one indicator that they're probably not being very effective.
So Carlos, just to break this down to its simplest form here, if you've got a business manager, what do they want to actually look at? What should they ask for? You mentioned a schema, right? So it's a
Yeah.
data model. So if they've never looked at a schema before, what should they be looking at?
Yeah, I would say if they've never looked at a schema and they're not really a technologist in that way, I would say you get messages from your team. They're always creating new tables. They're always creating new code. They can't find something, right? You ask them, well, which table is this in? And it's through that schema with 10,000 tables, they go, well, maybe it's in this one, maybe it's in that one, maybe it's in this other one, maybe there's 30 tables it could be in. That would mean it's out of control, right? In my mind, they don't have a good handle on it. So to me, it's not so much what the manager would look at, because yeah, the manager is probably not going to log into the system and figure out if that's the right number of tables, but it's the messages you get from the data engineering team. If I give the message that, that project we did last year, I can leverage 90% of it for what I'm doing now and reuse that code, reuse those objects, reuse that ingestion process, then that's the kind of message you want to hear, right? Turning around things that look complicated, I can turn them around faster because I don't have to deal with all that overhead. And I'm not confused. If I sound confused, that would be a bad sign too. Right?
So maybe a question they could ask along these lines is that if they're starting to work on a new project, the business manager could ask, well, what percent of this code needs to be written from scratch versus reused?
Yeah, exactly.
That could
Yeah.
be a good question, right?
Yeah. And how much of that foundation that we've already built are we going to leverage for this, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's makes sense. That's pretty doable. So Josh and Reed, same question to you guys. What is a symptom of things gone awry on your data engineering team that a business manager could detect?
Yeah. Yeah, and I might be a little controversial in my answer here, but I think it's making sure that they're not a team of order takers, right? Like the traditional like ranch between business and IT is like business comes up with the requirements and IT is just supposed to deliver it, right? I think your team can be more effective if they don't take the orders and they ask why, right? Like there's a good process in trying to understand truly what, like why am I getting data object sprawl, like right, like why do you need these additional data objects, why do I need to expand it, what's the value it's going to create for the business, to try and create that partnership with the business folks that you're working with, right? So if they're not asking why and they're just it's consuming all the work, right, and not looking at it thoroughly, that could potentially be one issue of like, hey, it's not effective or productive because they're operating in a way where, like Carlos said, they're not trying to implement reuse. They're not asking why is it valuable to the business. And so I think a team that's being effective is going to be able to do that and create that relationship with the business.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've made that recommendation to countless number of data leaders, don't be an order taker, be a strategist, right? So,
Yeah, I was going to add to that. I think, and what might be easier for somebody who's not a data practitioner to see is I don't know too many unproductive data teams that are also highly engaged and very happy. So if you start to see low engagement scores, frustration, turnover, it's hard to hire. That might also be another symptom that the team is not productive. Then you're going to have to kind of tease out, is it symptomatic of the organization isn't very effective, or is it the team and their process?
great. Listen, I'm going to read through a bunch of other symptoms, and I want you guys to pick ones that you feel are most indicative or not. Maybe they're completely off the chart here. So here are some symptoms. Every project is a one-off. I think, Carlos, that's kind of what you were getting at. Yeah, and that's typical for young data engineers, I think, especially if they're hand coding stuff. It seems to be a sign of the times that we're reinventing what we, unlearning and having to relearn what we learned 20, 30 years ago in this space. So every project is a one-off. The backlog is ballooning. There are a large number of working and temp tables that are similar. That's kind of what you were saying, Carlos. A new report with existing data takes weeks or months to create. The team's main KPI is number of errors fixed or lines of code written. There is little prioritization of requests. The team takes a long time to gather requirements. I think that's what you were saying, Josh. The team spends an inordinate amount of time on maintenance. The team spends a lot of time validating results because the users don't trust what they've given them. There's poor team morale, and high staff attrition. Reed, that's what you were saying. Data engineers use 5+ tools to do their jobs. That could be controversial. Business users are not happy, and business users, as a result, create spread marks and data silos. So anyway, that's about a dozen or so other symptoms. Did any one of those symptoms jump off the chart to you guys?
I do think the maintenance one is also important, right? Like if you're spending an inordinate amount of time doing maintenance on what you're creating, you're probably not spending enough time at the beginning before you start to write a single line of code, right?
Yeah.
That means you're writing things that are fragile, right? Or writing things that require a lot of maintenance because you want to be looking for reuse and automation, not necessarily looking for maintaining things, right? Like the majority of your time should be creating value, not supporting what you create, right? And so taking that mindset into a team and if you're a leader of this team, whether you're business or engineering, right? Like that mindset should be a parent of like, hey, we want to build really sturdy things that are going to last, and that like tech debt is one of the last things that gets addressed, right? So try and build things that are to use a technical term, idempotent, or things that are sustainable at the end of the day, so that they don't have to spend a whole lot of time addressing that tech debt.
So $1 million question, Josh, and I get this a lot, what is the proper ratio between development and maintenance, given what you just said? I mean, that would be an easy indicator, right, for a manager. Like we're spending 80% on maintenance,
Yeah.
and 20% on development.
I think if maintenance is outpacing development, you're in the wrong ratio, right?
Yeah.
I do think if you have a very large like base of pipelines or engineering backlog, you still want to be in the positive on development. So like new development, like I'm okay with 60-40, right? Where you're still doing 40% maintenance. It just depends on how much is that team having to manage, right? But you always want to be edging closer, so can I go from 60-40 to 70-30, right? And if I get to 70-30, that's probably a good ratio, because as a team, you also inherit things, right? Like there's things that you're gonna come into, you're gonna join a team, and your team now might be responsible for managing or maintaining something that somebody else wrote. And some of those things just happen, whether it's through acquisition or team changes or like low morale, so people left, right? So those things happen, but keep a positive ratio on the new development versus flipping that around.
Yeah, good advice. Carlos, Reed, anything stick out to you on that list that I read?
Well, I would just kind of, yeah, and I think part of what you were kind of saying too, or we're all saying, and on that list, it was maybe there a couple of times, is does everything seem like it's being built from the ground up? And again, somebody might say I'm doing new development when they're spending a lot more time doing new development than they should. I would also add to that, you often hear that something needs to be completely rebuilt and to add a new feature. So, there should be a limited amount of refactoring. Refactoring is normal and needs to be done. You refactor, but if you have good architecture, good data models, good engineering processes and principles, your refactoring should be a minimum. But if a developer or an engineer comes and tells you that they need to completely rebuild something they need to tear down this data model and rebuild it back up, tear down this engineering pipeline and rebuild it from the start because it won't work for the new functionality that you're doing. I think those would be messages again that I'm getting that I know things aren't right.
My reaction, Wayne, as you read the list, is I kind of thought that these go into two camps. And I think the leader needs to be mindful of, is this a problem that the data engineering team is driving, or is this a symptom of something that's happening in the company that's a problem for data engineering? So I heard a number of things that were like, hey, it's poor product ownership, it's poor business engagement. We threw the report over the fence and nobody was there to help support the development team. So I do find sometimes in companies it's an isolated function that doesn't get the support that it needs. So I think if you're the leader, you need to be mindful of, is this a problem of the team or is it a failure of leadership? And fix the leadership issues first.
Yeah, do you think the a ballooning backlog is part and parcel of what you're talking about there?
Yeah, it could be one of them for sure, right? I mean, you think of it as we want everything, we don't prioritize, we don't have a vision, we're just trying to get everything. Or it could be the team is really slow and the throughput's not good, and even being really critical on what we want, it takes a long time. So I'm saying each of those might have there are things that are going on with the data engineering team, or it could be, hey, we don't really have a good portfolio management, we don't define product ownership, we're not clear on what our requirements are, we don't business case things. You can't fix that with data engineering alone.
Right, right. Yeah. So the backlog, there could be any number of contributing factors to that for sure. So Carlos, one of these I think I got from you, which was data engineers use 5 or more tools to do their job. You recall that? And I'm wondering where that came from.
I'm I'm not sure I remember saying that. Maybe I did at some point, but I think in general what I was trying to say is that the tools should be used appropriately, right? The right tool for the right job. And often the tools are misused. There's too many tools. There's too many different ways to do it. And I think maybe one of the things a good point I was making is, where do you do your key transformations, right? And a good engineer understands where, and a good foundation will tell you where certain transformations are supposed to take place. But there's too much work being done during report loading time, or there's too much work being done at different parts in the process. And I don't know that 5 or more tools is bad. I mean, but most data engineers are probably working 1 or 2 tools and don't need to do much else, right? There's, the tools in and of themselves don't change a lot of what you need to do, right? So typically I would say a really good solid data engineering team probably works with 2 to 3 tools mostly.
Yeah. So what are those tools? A data transformation tool, right?
Yeah, I mean, these days you would
Data.
have typically an ingestion tool, a data transformation tool, an analytics tool. It's possible they might, again, with the introduction of AI, more AI and machine learning into pipelines, there might be a tool to develop machine learning models that are deployed into the data pipelines. But again, you start to get to the point where your true expertise in data transformation, for example, is in writing SQL, right? Or being really good at Python if you're transforming data that way. You should probably choose the tool you want to do it and just do it that way,
Yeah.
and be very, very much an expert at that process.
Josh, Reed, any thoughts on tools and technology in this area?
I mean, I think where I end up seeing that the most, what you just described, is an organization that's grown through acquisition and didn't rationalize sort of their roadmap, their architecture, their strategy. And so you've got different parts of the organization using Click, Power BI, and Tableau, and you've got different parts using, Informatica and a variety of different tools and a couple different catalogs like that. That's what I tend to see the contributing factor driving that, or maybe lack of enterprise standards and people can bring in whatever tool they want. Those are
Yeah.
probably the two symptoms or the two causes of that.
And I think the problem only continues to expand and compound with how quickly tools get created in this environment, whether it's data, whether it's AI, whether it's software engineering, right? Like you can always go on LinkedIn and see one of those NASCAR slides of like how all these things fit into the different categories that exist inside the data arena, right? And that's constantly changing, right? And so, like Reed said, I think as organizations look to kind of manage that, one of the things that's beneficial is how do you standardize? Like, what do you want your corporate standards to be, right? Like, is Python going to be our transformation language, right? Or do we need to do throughput because we're using Spark, right? Like, because that also will start to go up into like, okay, now I know who I need to hire. I know what skill sets I need, right? And how do I standardize around those things? And I think a lot of other organizations where we see multiple tools too is like uh, they've gone legacy and they've gone modern, right? But it's very hard to bridge that gap in that transformation or that migration and modernization, right? And so they have stable things that they continue to run, but then they have new people that they're bringing in that don't know those old technologies or old languages, and they're starting to develop things on that side of the house, right? And so bridging that gap is going to probably be a problem that needs to be solved in a lot of organizations, right? Because as they continue to grow and they're 30, 40, 50 years old, right? They're going to have to migrate into those more modern platforms and tools so that they can get resources to support and maintain and create new on those things, because they're not going to be able to find the people that know how to do the old technologies.
Oh, great. Before we go on, just like to encourage our audience to submit their questions or their comments in the Q&A tab, and we'll bring them into the conversation. All right, next question. Back to you, Josh. What is one question a business leader can ask his or her data engineering team to understand whether they are operating above or below capacity?
I think that's hard to answer with just one question. But what I'll say is, I think the first place is trying to seek to understand, right? And so I think the best approach is basically going to the team and saying, "Hey, can you walk me through your current workload and priorities? Tell me you know, are there important projects or improvements that you consistently have to defer due to lack of time or resources, right?" And with that question, we're really trying to figure out, is the team overloaded, right? They can't get to those important priorities because they're like, maybe they're flipped around. They're 80% maintenance, like we were talking about earlier. So they can't do the new stuff, right? Trying to figure out bottlenecks. Are there bottlenecks in the team? Like, hey, our deployment process, which is owned by another team, really slows us down, so we can't get those reports out, or we can't get these other things out. So we might be taking things into our backlog, executing against them, but we can't get to the final step of the process, right? And hopefully that promotes transparency, right? As a business leader, you're asking that engineering team, what's going on? Like, talk to me about what the problems are, right? And trying to create that trust and transparency with that team to hopefully understand, hey, I understand where your capacity is. Maybe I can help you get a resource for this particular bottleneck or this pain point, right? But if you don't ask that question, you don't seek to understand what's going on inside that team, you're never going to know whether or not they're above or below capacity. You have to ask those questions. You don't necessarily have to understand all the technical aspects of whatever they're doing, but you can talk to them about the pain points, the priorities, the things that are in their workflows that are blockers, and help try and remove them, eliminate them to create more capacity. Or if they're overachieving, it might be like, hey, what are some of the things, extra things that you're bringing into your team over a sprint, right? And how are you able to do that, right? And that's showing a team that's maybe high performing or has the capability to do stretch goals, right? So kind of, you can ask it with that positive lens, or you can ask it with that, hey, seeking to explore opportunities or pain points lens. But that should give you a pretty good grounding to figure out, how's that team operating, and are they above or below, and what are the things that are affecting them to be above or be below the capacity that they plan on having.
One of the most brilliant things I ever heard a data leader say was that they had their development team to dedicate an entire sprint every other month or so to just figuring out how to optimize their own processes and get rid of those bottlenecks that slowed them down. So they really made a commitment to that whole, well, you might call it data ops or just optimization of what they do internally. And they made that a discipline to really review. And the goal was to increase the capacity by eliminating all those bottlenecks. Anybody else on that idea? What one question business leader can ask their data engineering team before we got a couple of attendee comments here we'll get to in a second.
I'd like to ask what I call what would need to be true questions. So it helps alleviate the feeling on the spot a little bit. Like if, I've got an estimate on a project and it's going to take 4 months, like what would need to be true for us to be able to do this in 3, right? And you'll get resource answers, you'll get process answers, you'll get simplification answers, you'll get requirements answers. So I like to kind of probe that way a little bit, like, what would need to be true, or, what would need to be true for you to be able to tackle this year's work with your current team, like, and that helps kind of look at sort of all sides of supply and demand, and kind of gives you a sense too of what kind of problem solving partners you have in data.
Yeah, I like that. All right, a couple comments from our attendees. One attendee says or asked, data ops and agentic AI are making data engineering inexpensive and highly automated. What suggestions do you have for someone with such an advanced technology adoption? Kind of stealing my later question, but we'll tackle this now. Any thoughts?
So my thought on it is that's getting rid of some of the work that engineering teams maybe, they're like, it's the low value add work, right? Like it's helping automate some of like the pipeline development and some of the easier engineering tasks, but it's not solving the complex problems, right? So I like to think about it like the old like adage of data science is I'd spend 80% of my time finding and gathering the data, and I'd spend 20% of my time actually creating the model and actually solving the problem, right? What we're seeing with the AI and the agentic process is that 80% of like finding and gathering the data is becoming way easier. So now I have more time to actually solve the complex problem. So I think what it's helping is creating some inexpensive or some cost savings in gathering information and getting it together. But you're still going to run into the old complex problems of like, is the quality good enough for what I'm trying to do? Do I have to enhance the data, right? What is the complex problems I have to solve, whether it's transformations like Carlos was talking about earlier, or, hey, I need to bring in 50 variables for my model, right? Which ones am I going to wait? Which ones am I not going to wait, right? Like, is this going to be like, do I have to make decisions about this is a boosted random forest, this is a neural net? Like, all those things are still human kind of things that have to happen in that. And that's because of the experience they have, and they know the business that they're operating in generally because they've been there for a while. So I do think it's creating efficiencies, but it's not, it's allowing you to focus on the higher order problem.
We have a lot of folks in the organization right now exploring agentic AI solutions. And the other side of this coin that I'm seeing is it's going to drive a lot more demand. So like, an example might be for us, if we're looking to say, can I do something with agentic AI to improve my candidate screening process, I've got to go out to my applicant tracking system that doesn't necessarily have the best API and do a fair amount of work to make that data support the use case for the agentic solution that somebody wants to deploy. So on one hand, it creates some efficiencies. On the other hand, it creates a lot of demand.
Yeah, what I would add, I think, to both what you guys said, Josh and Reed, is we're way behind, right? I mean, we need help. I mean, and when I say we, data engineering teams, I mean, we go in and work with data engineering teams or in organizations, and there isn't one team that isn't way behind and needs a lot of help. And I think AI and some of the other things we're talking about here will all help us at least try to get caught up a little bit. And the problems are complex, they're hard, they're difficult, and the number of resources we have to deal with them are low, right? So we need help. And I would say we've had thresholds that we've crossed like this before where there was only so much we could do with data, and then suddenly we could cluster a bunch of machines together and do a lot more. And what did that do? Did that make it easier? Well, and so it made some problems doable. And again, that drove the demand and that drove the fact that we could do so much more. So I think the fact that we're behind and there's so much more to do means that, you know, we're barely scratching the surface of where this is going to get to, I think.
Question from Sammy. Do teams and organizations that adopt industry and domain data models perform better than ad hoc and custom data modeling organizations? Standard data models and design patterns drive reusability and reduce fragmentation. So standard models versus custom models, I guess, is the question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like so this is definitely an opinion, right? I feel like this is an opinion, right? My opinion is it works really well for businesses who are willing to change their operating model to fit that model that they're going to implement as a standard approach, right? It's the same thing like if you were implementing an ERP, right, to replace your business and you had custom tools that you wrote previously. Same thing. It's more of, does your business fit that standard model, and are you willing to conform to that model? And if you are, you can definitely get efficiencies, right? But if you feel like you have a unique value proposition that is related to the way that you store, capture, analyze data, right, and you're creating things that are not standardized around that, standard models don't necessarily give you the lift that you need because you're getting maybe some core attributes, but you're spending a whole lot of time transforming around them as well.
Yeah.
So I've seen it work both ways, but it depends on your business and how you're going to operate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've seen industry models used in a couple of situations, not a lot of experience with people using them, but I think, you know, the thinking is when you use an industry standard model is that, well, you'll save money, right? Because a lot of the work's been done for you. You don't have to go reinvent the wheel. And then you can also buy standard software or standard reporting tools because they know the model, right? Or they understand the model. So you can save time and money by not having to do everything yourself. On the other hand, when I've seen them done, they're always modified, right? And the reason they're modified is because I feel I have a competitive advantage in one area and I want to make sure that stands out. And I want those analytics to be right in front of me. And that competitive advantage that I have or that I want to gain is not in the standard model. If it was, it wouldn't be an advantage. And so, or I run the business kind of contrary to what Josh is saying. Instead of modifying my business to the model, I run my business a certain way because that's what makes us better. And so in the end, there's so much modification that takes place that you almost would have rather have built a model from the ground up. Right?
And then it becomes a nightmare trying to update the customizations when they release a new version of the model or the software. Okay, this is a longer question with 3 options to consider here. So in the case of data ecosystem modernization, going from legacy to new platforms, how can data engineering teams and business leaders agree on common goals? 1, should they focus on adjusting existing solutions to new platforms and demonstrate value, quick value, fast delivery? Basically a quick win, I think. Or two, should they focus on redesigning the solutions on new platform right from the scratch? Might be slow and incremental. Or three, should they focus on some other approach like implementing use cases that were not possible earlier? Team maturity might not be there. So it's like when you're modernizing, do you lift and shift? Or do you re-engineer and only put the new stuff up there? I think we've all been through this a number of times. I'm sure you all have plenty of
Yeah,
thoughts on it.
I really like this one. We get this a lot. You know, like you think about it here, there's a few things in this. Like, how am I getting my technology and business teams to get aligned around a vision? Am I going to deploy the new tech, or am I going to run new process? New process is hard to define if the business doesn't understand the tech. The new tech's hard to implement if you don't know what the process is. And so something that we've had a lot of success with is trying to get the business and IT alignment through service blueprints. So you've got sort of the use case or the journey at the top, and then it ties to the technology components below. And then when you go to paint sort of new future scenario, you've got new process, new tech, and you've got alignment between business and IT on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And you're speaking in a language that both understand. We've been involved with some pretty large modernization initiatives where that has one, I think, accelerated the point of getting to get clear requirements and drive sort of vision, but also prioritizing those things what will be most impactful. And lastly, eliminating a lot of work that you probably otherwise might have taken on that wasn't necessarily important for the business organization. So there's a lot out there about service blueprinting. It's not a UDIG specific thing, but we've had a lot of success applying it in that specific scenario that the question was about.
So Reed, just to clarify, you were picking number three in the questioner's question.
Yes,
Use
do something
case-
different. Don't
use
do,
ca- yeah,
yeah, don't do just applied tech. Don't just do new process. Bring it together and get better answers.
through use case design development,
Yeah.
right? And you call
And
it service delivery? Okay.
Service blueprint.
Service delivery, okay.
And I think by doing three, you can get aspects of one and two, right?
Yeah.
So by identifying what that new vision is, right, through that blueprint, right, there might be quick wins where you're going to prioritize a quick win to modernize something that was like the answer for number one, right?
Yeah.
Or number two, right? There might be like more of an incremental thing to show value to the business over time, because if you have like a large change management process, or you might have a change management problem through modernization. Like, hey, especially when companies tried to modernize before and they failed, number two becomes a valuable technique in the sense of, okay, we laid out our use cases, but we got to do this one incrementally because we're going to show value to the business incrementally and give it to them in chewable chunks and make sure that they see that we're taking their feedback as we build incrementally, which helps with the change management aspect of modernization, right? So
I was
I
going
think
to put a
you
link to
read
it in
them
the
all.
chat, but I don't seem to be able to do that. Sorry, Josh, I didn't mean to step on you. So if there's a way to share after, I've got a link that can help explain what we're talking about.
Oh, perfect. Now, Carlos, I know because we've worked together, you definitely advocate a use case driven approach to
Right.
modernization. And more than that, even the MVP, minimally viable product, implementation of those use cases. Is there anything you want to comment on that?
Yeah, often I think what we like to do is, similar to what Josh and Reed were saying, we try to identify maybe your biggest pain points. We might be able to drive 40 or 50 use cases that you need to work on that are new development efforts that maybe up to now you've been limited. You haven't been able to pull those off without the new technology. And so by identifying use cases that are high priority, big impact, but quicker to do. And when I mean quicker, something maybe you can do in 10 to 15 weeks, something along those lines where you stand up a new architecture, new infrastructure, you can implement something that can be deployed fairly quickly. It gives you a big bang for the buck because it not only proves the new architecture and then the new things you're doing, but it also gets feedback, gets people involved, gives you feedback. and then gives you a platform where you can build so much more. And often what we find is one of the benefits you gain is you also just eliminated a lot of technical debt, or you just forgot about it. You don't need to worry about it anymore, or you incorporated several new functions together that maybe previously were not capable. You weren't capable of bringing together. So there's a lot of benefits, I think, to doing it that way, but also getting an MVP out there that's fast and can give you a lot of quick feedback from your user community.
Yeah, that's terrific. Great questions from the audience. Keep them coming. We'll keep addressing them as long as you ask them. So I want to ask this question to Reed. Are there any KPIs that a business manager can use to evaluate the productivity of their data engineering team? I think we've kind of alluded to a few, but maybe you could specify some.
Yeah, and I guess like as I thought about this, it's kind of like, hey, what's the KPI to determine the best quarterback, right? There's a handful of them, right? There's not one single thing I would anchor to. So when I think about this, I'd probably advocate for a bit of a mix. Some that are productivity oriented, but also others that are going to be business value oriented. Because at the end of the day, the whole purpose of what you're doing with data engineering is to create some value for your organization. So, some examples I might have is just thinking about like, all right, what is the cycle time or latency of my data? Am I getting it from source to target in a time frame that's going to meet my business requirements? How much data can I ingest at one time? So like the size of the pipe and throughput, things like error rates and issue resolution times, and then data quality scores. I think of those as sort of like the core productivity metrics. But when I think about business value, right, you're going to have an internal customer satisfaction, right? Folks am I getting what I wanted or not? A lot of this is geared around supporting the organization to self-serve their data needs. So, how engaged and how much activity are you getting? How much penetration are you getting into the business teams that you're trying to support? Are they users or not? And then I really do think in terms of like business case, like how much value is being created from the data? Did it unlock a new model that reduced your attrition rates or helped you enter a new product into a market and had higher sales? So I kind of like to look at those and try to align them to sort of the culture of what it is your organization is trying to manage.
Anybody else have thoughts on that?
I think what makes it such a hard question is like Reed was saying, right? Depending on, it depends, right? What question do you want to ask based on the problems that you have or the issues you want to solve? And the only thing I would add is what I would do is try to identify again, maybe that one way that I could gauge the data engineering team, then I would baseline it, right? Because then at some point I need to then check against that baseline, right? Take a gauge against that baseline. So I would try to see, again, there's many ways, right? How many features are we producing? How many tickets are we closing? Or those kind of things. How many times do we move something to production and we don't have to touch it again? Those kinds of things. And I would just say establish that baseline, because it might be hard to know what question to ask, and then check it 3 months later, 6 months later, 9 months later, and see how your team's doing. Right.
Perfect.
And I might add one more, and it's more of analytics on analytics, right? Like, are there things that we can measure on the products that the engineering team creates, whether that, like, hey, our whole goal was to release this data set plus this report, right? Or this interactive, whatever it is. Well, how many people are using that, right, on the daily basis? Like, how many times is that data set being accessed, right? Because one of the values in the measures is not only like business outcome, but how, like, you produce this thing, are people actually using it, right?
Yeah.
And so some of that observability on the things that you create and try to get an understanding of, hey, the business said this was a priority, 5 people are using it, right? And that's also something that can kind of, then you can take that feedback back into your loop and say, hey, like, you asked us for this last time, you said it was a high priority, but we have observability on this and we can tell you that people aren't using it, right? So it helps you shape your conversations to help also manage your backlog.
That's great. Question for you, Reed. how do you know when to hire new data engineers or fire them, based on their productivity and the backlog?
Yeah. It's kind of funny when you said this question over Wayne, like the first thing that came to mind for me is several years ago, I had a conversation with an executive who asked me, hey, when am I done investing in my data? Like we've been doing this for 7 years. When does the investment end? And my answer was, well, when are you going to stop creating new products or trying to enter new markets or improve your operations? Right? It's something that it's the instrumentation of your business. You're going to have to continue to do that. I think for me, I think a little bit of it's going to have to do with how effective is the team or the organization in meeting the demand, and there are going to be different patterns over time, right? Like we talked a little bit a minute ago about modernization. That's going to create a spike in demand, and over that period, you're going to be keeping lights on your legacy systems while you're trying to build this new system. Once that new system's built, you're going to move into running it, but you're also then going to be decommissioning the old system. So the way I think about this is it might be more about what is your overall resourcing strategy than specifically hiring or firing. So if you've got those surges, that might be where you look for some partners because you're going to have bring them on board and then offboard them, 6, 9, 18 months later. So I tend to look at that. I'd also say sometimes it's maybe more about performance, right? So do I have individuals that are meeting our expectations, and do I have a performance management process that lets me evaluate that? That might be more about, me thinking about, am I reducing the team? But I guess the way I would put it is it's a hard fought skill set to get to have understanding of your data and your business. I would not take it lightly if I'm trying to reduce the size of the team, particularly when I think everything that's coming with AI is just going to be increasing demand.
You know what? I would only add maybe a softer skill to that I sometimes like to look for. And when there's, problems and fires and a lot of projects and all the things happening that happen at organizations, do your data engineers sound like they have a plan and they can achieve that plan, or do they sound confused and just overloaded, right? And I think that's something to look for. If they sound confused, they're gonna end up developing something confusing. And if they sound like they have a plan that can be achieved, right? That's a huge softer skill or softer indicator, I think, for me.
Yeah, that's a good one.
One thing I'd add to both what Reed and Carlos said is we talked about how this landscape is constantly shifting, right? AI is just creating more generation and demand. You want to see folks on your team that are upskilling and wanting to learn, right? Like the data engineering isn't going to be what it is today, tomorrow, right? Like things are moving so quickly. So you want to make sure folks on your team are looking for that because it's going to help with some of the stuff that everybody's been talking about, right? Like Carlos was talking about reusability and all these other types of things. Like, well, I should be looking for things that are going to help me do that, whether that's some reusability might be, I don't have to write custom code. I'm going to plug in this platform that I learned about that does exactly that same thing. And it does the same thing every time I do it. And oh, by the way, the cost is only like 50 cents per transaction or whatever it may be. Right. So having that learning mindset and that constant capability to evolve and shift and want to learn is a good thing to like plug. And if somebody's stagnating on your team, that can be an indicator of they're set in their ways and they potentially don't want to change. And that's something that needs to be addressed.
Have any of you ever fired or laid off data engineers or data architects?
Should we just, yes?
Yes.
And
Yes.
if so, why? What's the major culprit? I wonder if there's a common theme.
I mean, honestly, the times where I had to do that, it was either individual performance related or the company financials had a hand me down, everybody's cutting their budget sort of shift, right? So you're losing 15, 20% of your budget. In a lot of the enterprise, organizations, your budget is all people.
Mm.
Mhm.
Mine's more that the whole upskilling like thing. Hey, like I had people on my team that weren't shifting, right? So and needed them to be like, I guess in consulting, I've done consulting my entire life, right? So like I know Reed's worked in large enterprises, right? And there's budget cuts and things that happen with that, but we work, every project we have is different, right? So if you just want to be the guy that does Talon, that's not going to necessarily work. So that's kind of
Yeah.
some of the reasons that I've had to do what I did.
Mm.
Yeah, and similar to upskilling, I would say there's also kind of this fuzzy crossover into data engineering, right? We have software engineers, data analysts, people, that end up being de facto data engineers that they're maybe at a company and you hire them and they really want to be a full-fledged data engineer, and you find that maybe again their skills just weren't there, right? The skills of working as a data analyst and presenting data to yourself were similar, but not the same as presenting data to an enterprise and doing it in a quality way. And I think in some cases that's it's kind of an upskilling sort of thing too, where they were doing something on a smaller, more contained basis, and now they need to do it at the enterprise level. And that it's just a different way to develop, right? When I'm developing something that's going to be released to 10,000 people, it's got to work in certain ways very well.
Okay, gentlemen, we have entered the flash round here. It's our last question. Josh, you had mentioned that data engineering today is going to be very different tomorrow. So that's the gist of my question. How are things going to change in the next 12 to 18 months? Look at your crystal ball. And in the age of AI, we know things are moving fast. So give us a sense of where we're going to be in 12 to 18 months. We'll go down the line here.
Yeah. Who wants to go first?
I think,
Wayne
well,
ask you.
All right. I think, and maybe it's not like the traditional pipeline answer for like core engineering, where I think what I'm excited to see in the next 12 to 18 months is, I think we've had Gen AI with like generative AI for text and et cetera. I think we're moving towards Gen BI, right? Like the more context we can give models to be able to understand schemas, relationships, metadata, lineage, et cetera, I can use more natural language to get answers out of business data, right? So whether Gen BI allows me to create the right visuals in 12 to 18 months, I don't know about that, but I definitely think it can democratize and do at least very simple, like, hey, give me the aggregate business cost of et cetera, and we're going to get more accurate answers and really just be able to interact with our data in a different way, just like we're chatting with ChatGPT today or whatever for other things. We're going to do that live on our own data.
Mhm.
so that's another reason to have strong modeling foundation, right? Because the model semantics, they provide these Gen AI models with the data they need to really provide more accurate answers. Yes, that's a great one, Josh.
So just to say something a little bit different, but still AI related, is I'm going to say in the next 12 to 18 months, every new data pipeline created will have some kind of AI integration into it.
And in
So-
what
So
capacity?
as I'm moving data through my pipeline, I'm adding value to it with AI, right?
Hmm.
Is the thing. So, I could add a narrative to it. I could add a description to it. I could there's so much I could do, right? I could add a forecast to it that maybe I couldn't do before. So
So it sounds like all these things are net new additions that Gen AI can bring to your pipeline. Is that true?
right,
Yeah.
right.
Things that data engineers aren't doing now.
They aren't doing today, right? I could have a Gen AI process that says, okay, we just updated our financials data mart, add a new forecast before at the end of the process of the pipeline, and it also then generates a new forecast.
Cool. Oh, that'd be very helpful. All right, Reed, it looks like you get the last word.
Yeah, awesome. I'm going to take some license here, and it's a little bit more of a hope, and it's a little bit not exactly data engineering. Like I've been watching like the last 20 years, I feel like, we've seen massive advancements in compute, in data storage, in analytics, and how we do coding. I feel like we're still doing a lot of data governance like we did 20 years ago. So we've got tools that can pick up technical metadata. I'd really like to see the advancement be more around capturing the SME and providing the business context in the metadata and making that a lot easier for everybody to do. So that's sort of my hope on, next 12 to 18 months advance that we see, right? Using AI, going into email, going into, documents and looking for what those things mean and making that more accessible. Because we've seen a lot of cases where you go, hey, who knows what PR 687 means? Because it's a critical attribute for all these things downstream. And like, well, that guy is no longer here, or she left like 6 years ago. We're not sure. Let's guess. And so I'd love to see some advancement there.
Cool. I was talking to a small consultancy a couple months ago, and they were using ChatGPT and scraping client websites and emails and building the semantics that the model would need to create a data warehouse. So they said, well, they could get like 60% of the way there using the AI automation. So yeah, that might be something in the future. Push button data warehouses, right? Well, listen, I want to thank our panel. That was a really wonderful dialogue. I learned a ton. I hope our audience did too. And to our audience, thank you for participating. As I said earlier, we will send you the recording, link to the recording and this. Well, we didn't really have any slides this time, but you will get that. And if there's anything that any of us can do for you, answer any more questions, please let us know. And have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne.